Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This time we are back with a new YouTube video series and we'll be talking all about threat hunting in this one. Threat hunting is by far one of the hottest skill in security space right now. Everybody who is a SOC analyst or a security engineer working in some capacity towards threat want to do threat hunting and detection engineering in some form. Threat hunting is a vast topic, right? It involves a lot of theory and also involves a lot of practicals keep on evolving as and when you keep on learning about the new techniques about how to slice and dice a data. But theory is as important as the practicals are because they lay down the foundation for you so that you can hunt better, right? So we'll start off this series by covering the 101s. We'll talk about what, why, how, and what it is not, right? So we'll clear up the basics first, and then we'll go to deep dive into understanding how to conduct a hunt, how to define a hypothesis, on what all basis you can define a hypothesis, right? All of that will happen in future or next videos. But for this video we'll talk about all about threat hunting and what it is, right? So we'll quickly get started. So we'll start off by understanding what it is. So if you see on my screen, I'll start by defining what is threat hunting. So threat hunting is a very proactive operations, right? So what does it actually mean is when you're in a SOC, working in a SOC, you're mostly reacting to different alerts that you're receiving, right? That is how the traditional model of SOC was. You react to different alerts that are generated due to different alarms that you have configured at different log source level or in your SIM, right? So all of those alerts come into a centralized class pane, and that is where you SOC analysts keep on reacting towards it, right? And if they're not able to resolve it, they'll start escalating those. In this process, the entire nexus of detecting a threat lies on if there was an alarm or not, right? So this makes the SOC more of a reactive approach, right? You are reacting to different things that you have configured, and thus there were a lot of discussions to and fro in understanding if your use cases were built in the right fashion or not, right? If you're not building your use cases in the right fashion, your SOC is misconfigured, your alerts are misconfigured, you're missing on threats, and those will creep down. And so basically you are helping attackers have better dwell time. If you may ask, what is dwell time is the amount of time that an attacker spends in your environment before cyber defense team actually catches them, right? So that is the dwell time. So if you're not detecting them quickly, you are increasing attackers dwell time. So but you see, the common failure is having improper alerting or improper detections, right? And then there is a pace at which you can always keep on writing detections. There are different parameters that a detection affects. For example, the amount of true positive and false positive that a threat or that a detection generates, right? You would not want to write a detection that generates 90% of false positives always, right? Because then your SOC will get burnt out. So what's the solution to all of this problem, right? The solution to all of this problem emerged as threat hunting. So this is a more of a proactive practice where security engineers or SOC analysts went and before writing a detection or before even having an understanding of what this query would look like, they took up a new threat, understood what is how it is working, and implemented that, wrote a counter reverse or basically counter analytics for it, tested it in the environment to understand if your environment got affected by it or not. Now you may ask, why not build a detection on top of it if you're already doing a counter analytics, right? There are several answers to this, but the most prominent is it would generate a lot of false positive if you write such kind of a query that detects a very nicely blended attack, right? So what I mean by is, nowadays attackers will use a lot of common tools that are already present in the environment. For example, we tend to use PowerShell for development. We tend to use Python for development. Attackers will try to slip in their scripts or their code and execute them via these programs so that it blends in with the environment, right? You would have developers using PowerShell, and now the attacker is also using PowerShell. So there's no anomaly, right? There's no difference that you can generate. But so if you configure a rule that generates all PowerShells, you would have 99% false positive. So what is the how to eliminate that situation? You basically don't write a rule, right? You basically either audit all the PowerShell commands that were running in your environment over the last defined period of time, say 30 days, 7 days, whatever it is, or you configure that kind of a report that is generated weekly and is comes to you, you audit it, and then you close it. So that happens as a cycle, so that you don't have an alert, active alert for all the partial invocations happening in your environment, but rather you get some kind of a audit capability or a reporting capability, or even sifting through all the commands, probably daily, that are happening. If there are baseline deviations, all of those are the mechanisms how you basically hunt. But all of that also constitute why you cannot write a detection for PowerShell kind of a alert, but rather have a threat hunting approach towards it. So what you essentially do is basically keep on collecting all the data into a singular lake or a sim, and you define some kind of a hypothesis towards which you go and test your data and understand if it is a true or false. Now what is interesting is, why are you actually hunting, right? Because one of the reasons that we already discussed is it's very difficult to write detections for threats that blend nicely in your environment. But there are more, right? Another is, this form of threat detection is basically proactive, right? You're not waiting for an alarm to trigger. You are proactive. You are consuming a lot of situational awareness, lot of data from everywhere. So as a human, you tend to have some indicative intuition that, okay, this might be a threat I should test my environment against. For example, there is a new APT attack happening to a similar industry that you are in. So even if you don't have detections, even if you don't have alarms, your intuition might be, there might be attacks happening on my environment as well. Are we actually detecting them? Are we actually finding them? How do you test that? You define that hypothesis, right? That there might be a threat, or this threat might be attacking us, and you go and test in your check in your sim around events that are of interest and relate to this hypothesis. So this form is entirely proactive in nature. Another reason why you would want to do threat hunting is basically your traditional tools tend to miss on the alerts or miss on the telemetry that they are collecting to generate proper alerts. And if there is a threat that has bypassed security layers that you have configured, say firewall or your EDR, they might already be executing in your environment. So your assumption is there is always a threat that has or crept in your environment or is attacking your environment. Without this basic hypothesis or basic assumption, your threat hunting exercise is not valid, right? Because if I assume that there is a threat that is attacking us, then only there is a reason to go ahead and check your telemetry or data set. If I assume there is a threat that is not attacking us, then there's no reason, right? So your base understanding of a hypothesis is that there is an assumption that there is an attack going against us, or it has bypassed several layers, or it is an internal insider threat, right? Most of the sophisticated attacks use access brokers, right? So there is an insider threat that you also have to deal with. So that could be a potential assumption. There are lots of traditional tools that every enterprise has to work with. So again, you assume that a tool is not working properly, you assume that the tool might have missed something, right? All of these are some of the very basic reasons why you need to hunt. And hunting forms a very good complementary partner to your existing threat detection engineering process. So if your hunts are working with detections, there's nothing like it, right? You have reactive as well as proactive, both the approaches covered for your threat detection. But there are some myths in the market that I will bust before we go on to understand the challenges along with it in the life cycle of threat hunting. One of the most popular myth is that you are matching or searching IOC in your environment and that is threatening. For example, there is an IP29 attack, and these were the IOC, these were the IPs from those attacks, and you are looking into them for them in your environment, and that is threatening. But that is not right. IOC matching is not threat hunting. You can't be matching URL domains, IPs in your environment and call it threat hunting. Threat hunting is purely focused towards the behavior of an attack, right? You are looking for some behavior that shows that there has been an attack that was bypassed. If you're matching IOCs, that is very well an indicator match rule in your SIM. You could, and if you can stream your intelligence from your intelligence product to your SIM, those should be covered, right? Those should be an automated way of detecting IOCs, and there shouldn't be any manual effort of you going and searching those IOCs and call it threat hunting. So what you're working with are basically TTPs. You're working with tactic, techniques, procedures that we discussed as part of MITRE attack, and you will be using these TTPs to actually devise if there are behaviors in your environment that are malicious in nature, right? Another popular myth is that you can automate it, and this is very popular, right? Lot of products, lot of vendors, lot of security practitioners, they will come up to you and say that we have automated threat hunting, our product take cares of automated threat hunting. But beware that this doesn't work like that. There has to be a human element that actually sifts through to understand what is malicious and what is not malicious. You can very well implement AI to devise up a model, basically to define an anomaly, but who is validating that anomaly if that is a true anomaly or not, right? So you always have that human element. Also, the human element take cares of helping you devise up a hypothesis, your assumption, because those are calculated and educated hypotheses. So it can't be that you automate that entire process. A human actually take cares of entire process of hunting, where he's testing, building up a hypothesis, testing that in the environment, seeing if there is a malicious behavior or not, identifying it, then taking it to an IR process, right? All of that is, you can automate some portion of it, like the bits and pieces in between that we will discuss when we start implementing a threat hunting program in our lab environment. So we can discuss what else can be automated, but you cannot entirely automate the full process. Another very popular myth is it's an elite capability. No, it's not. It's just an educated hypothesis that is being tested in your environment via, and when I say analytics, most probably your analytics is called query. So what you're doing is basically writing a query to detect what is supposed to be a TTP. So it's not an elite capability. Anybody who knows the environment, understands threats, can do it. So even your security analysts who are of L1 level can do it. It's just the matter of understanding how to execute this thing. Another popular myth, and the last one, is it's a new thing. No, it's not. It's not new. Threat hunting has been in the industry for a long period of time. Everybody has been testing what is malicious, what is not malicious in their data sets. It's just that the term has been popular lately. Like the term threat hunting has been in the market for close to now 5-6 years, where people have actually started calling this entire process as threat hunting. But there were always security engineers, practitioners, analysts who used to go back to their data, ask difficult questions, and understand what was happening in the data and detect if there is something malicious happening or not that was not already detected by an alarm or an alert, right? um, but why is it so difficult, right? Given that if, well, all you have to do is basically understand what a hypothesis is, devise one, go and test it. What are the challenges? The challenges actually lie in the terms of expertise, right? I said that anybody can do it, but provided you should also have understanding of how threats function, basic level of understanding of threats. How do they function, what is their behavior, how you write a query, what kind of log source you consume. So basically there is some amount of technical expertise or domain expertise that creeps in when you are actually executing the hunt, and they will keep on increasing as and when you keep on completing hunts, right? Your understanding of the environment will immensely grow when you complete a hunt, because then you have understood how a specific fashion or a behavior looks for in your environment, and how does it actually function in your environment, what are false positives of your environment regards to that analytic, right? So that technical expertise and domain expertise will keep on increasing, but you should have some amount of understanding of how threats work, how you have collected your data, how you have parsed your data, how your data is searched, if you can write a query around it, right? All of that will help. Another challenge that most of the security practitioners or threat hunters face is justifying the ROI of threat hunting, right? This is difficult. Why? Because you really don't have a threat at the end of every hunt or hypothesis test that you do, because your hypothesis is just a hypothesis, right? Your assumption might be wrong, and that is where it's very difficult to say that you implemented a threat hunt or you conducted a hunt for say 7 days over the last 2 weeks, but you couldn't find any threat. Now this gives some sense of negative output, but it's really not, right? Because threat hunting is just not finding actual threat, but it yields a lot of different outputs or deliverables that could be used to strengthen your cyber defense or the defensive posture of your entire organization. Some of these I have documented on the screen, as you can see. What you basically drive down is the baseline, right? For example, we just took the partial example. So when you're testing partial, you will actually baseline your environment to understand what are benign partial executions that are happening day in day out, right? What are some of the scheduled partial executions that you are observing, which team actually calls most of the partial invocations, who is the actual top talkers when you conduct the partial baselining, right? Top 5 hosts that are making most of the partial communication. You validate your environment against a certain threat, and if you're not find your threat, that means you have done a good job, right? Your threats have not either not targeted you, or you were um, successful in defending your organization against those threats. So another thing that you do is you basically validate your controls and security policies while doing a hunt. You would go back, say for example for partial, you would go back to your configurations and your MDM systems and understand what kind of partial is allowed, which version are we using, which version have we allowed, or which versions have we not allowed, if there is a vulnerability in the existing version, all of that. Something that you will baseline and understand. You will another most important thing that you will understand is your gap analysis, right? Do you even have partial events collected in your SIM? Do you even have the log source that is reporting all of that? Do you have enough visibility? For example, you might be conducting only or collecting only Windows logs, right? So 4688 Windows event ID would tell you that partial invocation happened, but would not tell you the whole command line. So this kind of things is something that you will observe lately when you are conducting these hunts, and those are really good inputs to how you can devise or bring in better visibility and bird eyes view in your environment. Another thing that you would do is basically find gaps in your detections, right? So if you are already have a similar detection working in your SOC space, what you would do is you would understand what this detection was not able to detect, because now you have baselined the entire environment to understand what kind of invocations are happening. So it's just not about finding an incident or finding a threat, it's about strengthening your defensive posture and environment and building better defense for your organization, right? So these are the some of the challenges and some of the outputs or deliverables that you will be getting out of threat hunting exercises that you would be conducting. we'll go back we'll go back to the tools and technologies that are required to conduct these hunts. Basically there are very few tool requirements. There are, or if you can say, there are no tool requirements. I have just listed down some of the basic tools that you would find in all the environments, so that it's easy for you to understand where to go and where to start from. But what you essentially work with is a system that can hold amount of data, and you have some amount mechanism to query it. It could be just AWS S3 with AWS Athena, right? S3 for all the logs, Athena for all the querying that is possible, and you can write as complex queries as possible to figure out if there are threats or not. Good if your querying system doesn't cost you enough, or you are not charged per query, because then you will be running a lot of queries to figure out if your hypothesis is true or not. And if you keep on incurring charge per query, it's a bad model, right? Then your hunting program will incur a lot of cost. So if you have a dedicated sim that doesn't charge you per query, it's good. You can run large amount of queries and figure out if there are threats in your environment or not. So generally, a sim system is something that you'll find everywhere and should be enough for running your queries, provided all your log sources or data is aggregated there. I have mentioned EDR solution. Why? Because you get a lot of process related telemetry, endpoint related telemetry for process data, driver load, network operations, DNS operations, and those are really rich telemetry to work with. If you can conduct or collect all of that into your SIM, there's nothing like it, right? Because then you'll be able to correlate between different log sources. You'll be able to write more complex queries. But even if not, your EDR solution, most of the popular EDR solution gives you some sort of a view where you can write complex queries and figure out if there are threats that are seen in your environment that the EDR might have missed, or if there are telemetry correlation that you want to do is possible via this solution. So a SIM and an EDR forms the most basics of it. If you have any network detection and response tooling, even they would offer some kind of a view for you to search your flow logs or network logs or your DNS logs, all of that, right? Another really good tool that would help in your threat hunting process is an intelligence platform, because the intelligence platform tends to collect a lot of intelligent data. And I don't mean data to be IOCs. By data I mean operational intelligence that have behavior reports, process related data, TTPs related data. All of that reports come to your platform, and that could be consumed by you, and those could be related or analyzed to understand if that report or that threat really matters for an environment. If that really matters, you should go ahead and hunt for it. So your consumption point becomes your threat intelligence platform. So you will always have new intelligence input. Those will form your hypothesis. So it will be a less of a drag to build your own custom hypotheses, rather than you will be having some kind of a pipeline that gives you some reports, some processes. There it still has to be analyzed, but gives you some reports and processes that you take in, work towards to devise your new hunting hypothesis, right? So apart from this, you really don't need a lot. You would of course have a lot of reputation checking websites, URL scan, virus total, all of that available for you. You must have I would recommend hosting your own Cyberchef. Cyberchef is a really cool tool that helps you convert data from one format to another format. Ideally, it's a GitHub project, so you can fork and host it on your own. If not, it's also available for you to access on the web, so you can even use it. It's good to have that tool in your arsenal, because a lot of times you will face that there are encoded command lines, there are encrypted files that you would be working with, and you want some way to decrypt that, and that should be quick, right? So Cyberchef has a lot of options and supports a lot of cryptography algorithms. So it's a really good tool to have it. Coming back, there is some amount of skill development that will happen when you start hunting. These skills might already be with you before you start hunting, or they might develop over the journey. But data analysis is one of the core skill, right, of a security, even for a security analyst, right? You are analyzing a large amount of logs to pinpoint if there is something malicious going on or not, or you're investigating an alert or investigating an incident. And that is when you figure out if this piece of data actually is important or not, what does it actually mean, and you pivot from there. So this entire process of doing data analysis, writing queries, slicing and dicing data, pivoting from one piece of data to another piece of data, correlating, is important, and that helps you in that entire process of threat hunting as well. It's really good if you have knowledge of operating systems, because operating systems are where your endpoints, basically your endpoints will be running operating systems, and that is where your malicious programs will interact with. So if you understand operating systems, you understand how the logs of an OS looks like. It's really helpful for you to understand what the behavior would look like for that operate platform, right? So again, a really key skill. If you have it, if you don't have it, you will learn over the time. For example, even if you don't understand Windows system, you will see different logs. You would understand what each log means just by googling around it, figuring out what parameters, command lines it tracks, and use it to conduct an analysis, right? And over the time, you will also learn how this operating system works. Familiarity with cybersecurity frameworks is important, because then you know how to tie your threat hunting to an existing SOC process or an existing SOC framework, or you use different hunting models to know what you are actually hunting for, or to know how this model actually spans out, and choose the best model for a given hypothesis or a given threat, right? So having all of this is bonus. It's not important, but it's really good if you have all of these in place already. So this is how your threat hunting is, what threat hunting is, how threat hunting is, how do you do it, some challenges, popular myths, tools, some technologies that is required. But most importantly, let's try to deep dive and understand how the life cycle of threat hunting actually looks like. You can look up on the internet as well. The life cycle is pretty simple. Let me change the view so that it's visible. Yeah. So the life cycle starts with you creating a hypothesis, and then you moving into a phase where you are collecting data related to that hypothesis. Then you move into analysis or investigation phase. Then you validate your outcome, and then you move into an IR phase if at all this led to a successful detection, and then you move back into hypothesis phase. So this is the entire life cycle. But to exemplify this, as we discussed just now, there are malicious PowerShell execution happening in the environment is a basic hypothesis. You start collecting data. In this phase, what you'll collect is basically all the process related data, where process name is PowerShell, and then you have command lines in respect to it. And then you will also start analyzing that data to understand what all command lines are PowerShell executing. If there is a malicious command that is you are seeing to be executed, then you validate that if that finding is absolute malicious and your hypothesis is a true or a false, and basis that you move to a response, mitigate, or invoke IR phase, where you might have to invoke incident response since you have found a unknown threat or a threat that was not previously discovered, right? So this is the process that you will follow. But to iterate on the same life cycle, you can understand that the hypothesis creation and data collection is basically part of research and character development. So what you're doing is basically developing, researching, and developing some sort of character to that malicious behavior. You're giving it some character. You're actually carving out what is the malicious behavior. In this process, you are outmost focused on external intelligence, collection of data, processing of data, sorting and sifting through to understand what is there, what is not. Now, data collection and analysis form the action part of it, right? Here you are playing with the data as well as analyzing that data. So it's the most fun area where most of the SOC analysts get that kick of analyzing that data. Most of the researchers get their fun here, right? While they are dissecting threats, understanding the working of a threat and all that. Then comes the analysis and validation phase, right? This is your baselining, understanding what's happening, what's not happening, all of that happens here. And then validation and response forms the response part of it, right? If you have an outcome, you respond to it, and then you move back. So this is how your threat hunting life cycle actually looks like. We'll also go ahead and discuss some of the skills that would be very beneficial if you have them, right? Some of the basic terminology that you should understand before you actually start hunting. I'll try to even cover these up into the next videos that I'll create, but to just give you a map, the barrier to entry is none, as we discussed, right? There's nothing stopping you to start hunting today, but it's very crucial to understand security fundamentals, the very basics of types of threats. What does phishing mean? How will a phishing be detected? How will a phishing look like, right? How would a ransomware look like? What is ransomware? Types of ransomwares? All of that, the types or nature of threats definitions is something that should be very crystal clear to you, because then that helps you build better hypotheses or amount to better results, right? Types of attacks, different types of attacks over networks, over endpoints, over SaaS, over cloud, all of those are really good starting point. You should also understand logs, right? The different fields that are captured, different sources, different types of logs. Some might be giving you just JSON, some might be giving you syslog, some might be giving you a single line log, right? So multi-line log. Somewhere you might need to write a regex to parse it or extract a value. Understanding this will help you because you'll be playing with logs a lot. You will have data because you're not having the concrete understanding of what you are actually hunting. So sometimes you will have logs of various natures coming into the bucket, and from there you will have to pivot and find out what the threat is all about. So having that understanding of logs helps you become a better data analyst, right? So you'll analyze better, you will search faster, you will extract data better, right? All of that. In terms of concepts, you should understand kill chains, because then when you are backtracking an investigation, you are hunting a, you know which phases to look for, which phase are you looking for, which what could be potentially previous phase of this, what could be the next phase of it, right? All that is helpful when you understand kill chains, be it MITRE attack, be it Lockheed Martin, be it Diamond model. You should understand all of these models and kill chains. You should also understand TTPs in depth. Understanding of TTPs is important because the better you understand TTPs, the higher you will be up in the pyramid of pain, right? We all understand pyramid of pain. It's a pyramid where at the bottom there are artifacts that are easy for an attacker to change, and on the top there are behaviors, tools that are most difficult for an attacker to change. So we want to be in the top region, right? We want to write our queries in a fashion that they detect invariance. Now, no matter what attacker chooses the path to achieve his goal, the query or the analytics should be invariant to attackers' technique. So you will be able to achieve that only when you understand TTPs, right? So that is again very important concept. You should be very through and throughout with MITRE attacks. Go ahead and read MITRE, different attacks, popular attacks. There are reports attached to it. Use all of that. I think I'll give you a walkthrough of how to use MITRE in the next video, but that's for the next video. You should go ahead and start reading now. Another important skill in this domain, be it threat hunter, be it SOC analyst, be it security engineer, is to be updated with latest intelligence, incidents that are happening in and around you, so that you are well versed with what's relative, what's the situational awareness all about, and how to actually process new information. If you're not updated with latest intelligence, you're lacking a lot behind than what's happening in the landscape, right? So if you are updated with intelligence, it will be easy for you to even devise a hypothesis and also be able to figure out newer threats in your environment. So again, very important skill. You can use some kind of a RSS feed, you can use some kind of an intelligence product, depends on case to case, users to usage, to be updated around latest and greatest what is happening around you. So these are some of the basic skills and fundamentals that are required. But as bonus, if it would be really amazing if you can write detections. If you have written detections previously, you know how to write a query, do some filtering on top of it, put some defining parameters, narrow down, drill down, all of that will be really helpful. And it's really good if you have used some form of a pipe processing language such as SPL, Custo, Splunk, SQL. If you have used all of this, you know how to pipe data, take data from one bucket to another bucket, do some processing, move into the third bucket, and keep on doing it until you find that fine-grained table of data that you need, and that will help, right? And that is one of the really key skills that you will develop while threat hunting. You should also understand intelligence. You should be able to consume intelligence, right? Understand in a report what is, if this is a technique or a tactic, right? All of this will help. And it's really a jump ahead if you are already a security analyst that focused on investigation, because if you see in the life cycle, a large amount of time is spent on analysis and investigation. Query writing is probably one time. You might have million of records coming out to you as output, and from there you will be pivoting, analyzing. So if you have been a security analyst, it's really a jump ahead. So all of this will actually help you kickstart your threat hunting journey. So I'll wrap it up here. I'll leave you with the 101s and basics today. All of these are some of the important terminology, some of the important definitions that you should understand before you actually start hunting. And in the next video, we'll try to cover up more of the advanced theory to understand different models, different hunting hypotheses that you can create, how to define a hypothesis, how to use MITRE ATT&CK to actually define a hypothesis or pick a TTP to hunt from, and all of that. And we'll slowly deep dive into practicals. So I'll wrap it up here. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. I'll be more than happy to answer any of your queries. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you are seeking some amount of mentorship